Today we're here with Connie Mckeage from OneView to talk about platforms and their progress in 2013. Thanks for joining us, Connie.
It's my pleasure.
At the start of the year, what platform developments did providers set out to achieve?
I think it's one of those very unique times where all platforms were on the same page, which is it was absolutely dominated by FOFA reforms. When you look at what needed to be done in terms of FDS reporting, when you looked at the opportunity cost of putting things in place for what we thought would come about with opt-in clauses and making the strategic decisions around it, when you looked at the plethora of manufacturing that came back into the equation and how you dealt with it, I think it really was the overarching theme was absolutely FOFA.
And out of those areas that you mentioned, where did we see the successes?
That is a very interesting question because I don't think we'll have the answer to that up until 12 months from here where we look back with a rear view mirror. I think it is quite interesting to see that some of the changes that we predicted and the severity of it haven't come to fruition. I think part of it is to see what reforms the new government brings in, what changes they keep and move forward with that was introduced by the Labour government. It's really quite an interesting time, but one thing for sure, I think optimism in the sector itself, probably a little bit because of the markets, as well as just the hope that some of the changes that we thought as an industry were probably ridiculous, like opt-in, don't come to fruition.
And what do financial planners want from their platforms, particularly in light of FOFA reforms and best interest duty?
I think that they're looking for choice, first and foremost. I think if you act in the client's best interest, it's very difficult to argue that you have one solution for all clients. I think beyond that, they're looking for a lot of the back office responsibilities to taken off of them. I think increasingly they've understood that their value proposition is really about client engagement, really getting to know the client, which is all of the old stuff reinvented, the get to know your client, how do you add value. I do think that client expectations are a lot higher now, so that the demands at the front end of the relationship have increased accordingly. So I think moving forward, it's all about client interaction and outsourcing as much as they can.
Great. And from industry research, we know that advisors are decreasing the number of platforms they use. So in order to get ahead going forward, is it vital that platform providers cater to every demand, or is it better to specialise in delivering certain functions or offerings?
Look, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it depends on the platform strategy. What I do know is that people are consolidating. Luckily, OneView has been one of those recipients of the consolidation, which is, fantastic. But I do think that moving forward, some people will look for deep domain experience, particularly in areas like self-managed super funds. When you look at reporting of self-managed super funds, when you look at concessional contributions and how that's reported, how it's brought up into a more holistic framework, you could say that that's specialized reporting, but whether that's mutually excludes being a more general provider, I don't necessarily think is the case. I think you can be both, but find particular areas where you excel, such as, for instance, self-managed super fund reporting.
Great. And over the last 24 months, discussions in this space have been occupied with platform fee slashing.
Yes.
Is pricing still a major issue in the industry?
If it is, I think they have a more systemic problem, which is it means that the providers that are price making in the market are usually doing that because they don't actually have a very good value proposition. In the end, that's generally not sustainable. And either the client service fails because they're not continuing to reinvest in their underlying platform, or it's found out to be what it is, which is a price cutting exercise because they don't have the value proposition. So people come in and out of the market as price makers. We tend to, ride with those waves and understand that something's got to change. Either they'll be taken out because they're not financially robust enough, or in the end, they have to extend their value proposition, and as soon as they do, they no longer stay in that position. At OneView, we've never been in the market as a price maker. We don't think that's our strategic position. Occasionally, we end up being the lowest price on something, but it's really by default rather than strategy.
Great. And we've also had a number of independent platforms in the industry now. Is there room for more?
I'm an economist by trade, right? So I believe in an equilibrium that comes to the market. So the answer is yes, as long as the market sustains it. So if you look at the general concepts of demand and supply, if there's an oversupply, there'll be consolidation and it move back at some point to an equilibrium. What I do believe in is that new market entrants are actually good for competition, and good competition makes for a better outcome for customers, even if that occasionally is a short-term competitive position. So I would say that the answer probably is a yes.
And what are some of the innovations we'll see in the platform space, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think the platform space will be redefined. I think, unfortunately, it's being defined now virtually as the lowest common denominator, which means high cost, limited choice, and basically proprietary product. I think moving forward with the introduction of more automated choices such as Calistone at the back end of platforms and really other areas of the market, as well as the introduction of, we still call it Aqua 2 because we like that acronym. You've got innovation and new distribution at the front end. With the SMSF regs coming out, you're seeing a shift of the accountants taking more interest in self-managed super funds again. So distribution is changing, intermediation is changing, therefore, by default, the definition of a platform will be changing. So if you look at a broker using the ASX, and the ASX can now, or will now, be able to settle and transact in managed funds as well as listed securities, is that a platform? So it'll be interesting to see how the definition changes. What I don't want it to do is stay the way that it is. In other words, people say platform and they think high cost, limited choice, basically oligopolistic behavior. That's I'd like to see go.
Yeah, and you touched on this in your answer. Will advisors be using platforms the same way they are using them now?
Look, realistically, I think it'll take a while for a certain subset of the planning world to move. Unfortunately, some people, just by nature, are quite embedded in the status quo. They don't like change, and I don't think that's advisor or not advisor. I just think it's a personality trait that some people have and some people don't. But I think in the end, they will end up being swept along with the change, the same way that we saw it in online broking. I remember when I was fortunate enough to be part of the change in the days when Paul Rickard was running ComSec, and I had the privilege of working with E-Trade. In those days, there was a lot of resistance, but look at it now. Online broking is just part of, a being for anybody who trades, and I think the same inevitability will come to platforms.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Connie.
Again, it's my pleasure. Thank you.